you own one Bitcoin, you're almost guaranteed to be a millionaire as this whole thing unfolds. And I think you're going to be much more than that. So,
but you don't have to be smart.
no.
That's
Well,
you got
to be willing to think outside of the box, and you've got to be smart enough not to sell. I mean, there'll be a lot of mistakes people will make, Robert. I mean, it'll go up, they'll double, and they'll think, oh, I got a profit, I got to take it. They'll be, hanging on to it and being patient. It's not simple. Some Bitcoiners, a mistake they make is just say, hey, take all your money and put it in this. No, that's not true. Because it does go up and down a lot. It is volatile. And so when I'm talking to a friend and saying, put some money in Bitcoin, I always say, be sure that what you put in there, you can live with a drawdown of 50%, because I've lived with 5 of those and they're no fun. But I know it's, they go to higher highs after each drawdown. And by the way, I've used the drawdowns to buy more.
Lepard opens with a powerful insight. We're living through a period of extreme monetary asymmetry, and almost no one recognizes it. He compares buying Bitcoin today to buying Amazon stock in 2005. The signals are there. The writing is on the wall, but few are paying attention. This moment isn't about hype or short-term trades, it's about recognizing a fundamental shift in how money works and acting before the cost of entry catches up with the opportunity.
And before that, be the one who says, I was here before 100K. I'm on a mission to hit 100,000 subs before 2025 ends. Help me get there. Subscribe now and drop your thoughts on the market in the comments. Let's grow and win together.
Asymmetry of where we are right now. I mean, this is a big thing that very few people, that's almost, high probability to happen, that very few people understand. I mean, it's, buying sound money right now, in my view, is like buying Amazon, in 2005. I mean, just, you can see where this is going to go. Yeah. And in 10 or 20 years, you're going to really notice a big difference between those who understood this and positioned themselves correctly and those who didn't, in terms of their financial outcome. The notion of having a form of money that cannot be diluted, this has never occurred before in human existence, ever. It's something new. I mean, even gold, as sound and beautiful as it is, increases in supply by 1.7% a year. There are only 21 million Bitcoin. There will only ever be 21 million Bitcoin. It is perfect sound money. And that's why it's been the best performing financial asset for the past 15, 16 years. And I said at a recent conference that I spoke at, I said, I can't wait until financial advisors start getting sued by their clients for, I know people who've gone to their financial advisor and said, hey, I hear about this Bitcoin thing. Maybe I should get some. And the financial advisor shits all over it. And, how can they do that? I mean, the financial advisor's job is to protect that person, and they're ignoring the financial asset that has the best performance of the past 16 years. And I'm like, what?
The reason they don't recommend it, they don't get a commission.
Well, exactly. That's obviously, that's the point, and that for the same reason, by the way, as you and I both know, that they don't recommend gold. Gold, if you look at gold's performance, as you pointed out in many cases in all your letters, you look at gold's performance, it's beat lots of things, and it's held its value in terms of purchasing power. And yet go to a stockbroker and ask them about gold, and they'll sneer at you and say you're being a gold bug. And Michael Saylor thinks that Bitcoin's going to 13 million a coin, and I agree with him. Now, that's going to take many, many, many years, but you can buy that coin today for $100,000. I mean, as you know, like in the gold mining business, as you point out, with any other company investment, even with Amazon, they had a management team that could have screwed it up. I mean, the mathematical protocol behind Bitcoin, has now been time tested for almost 900,000 blocks in 16 years. And I don't think it can get screwed up. I think we just sit back and watch it increase in value. So, if you're an artist or, you have a different craft, you don't have to suddenly have a financial advisor. You can just put your money in Bitcoin, forget about it, and know that every year you'll gain in value. It's kind of an amazing leveler of the financial system and the notion that average people can front run Wall Street and all these financial geniuses. I mean, I went to Harvard Business School and I've tried to interest them. I said, guys, this is the most revolutionary monetary development in the last 2,000 years. And, I know some of the students there and they've got a club and it's like 3 people. I sent it to the dean and he said, well, that's an interesting book, but and I proposed that we have a debate about it up on stage, and they haven't followed up. They're not interested. And I'm like, you're missing it. You're just missing an enormous change. And it came from the grassroots. It came from just average people understanding what this is. And it's going to continue. To be fair, I mean, in 10 or 20 years, there are going to be people, our relatives and others, who are going to say, hang on a sec, you mean to tell me you got an entire Bitcoin? I mean, think about it this way. Here's an interesting model. We think there are about 45, maybe 50 million people in the world who are millionaires. I think it might be higher than that. But there are only 21 million Bitcoin in the world, and some of them have been lost, and some of them are locked up, at MicroStrategy and so forth. And so every millionaire in the world can't even own one Bitcoin, right? I mean, they can own half a Bitcoin if we distribute them evenly. And by the way, they're not distributed evenly. So, you own one Bitcoin, you're almost guaranteed to be a millionaire as this whole thing unfolds. And I think you're going to be much more than that. So,
but you don't have to be smart.
No. Well, you've got to be willing to think outside of the box, and you've got to be smart enough not to sell. I mean, there'll be a lot of mistakes people will make, Robert. I mean, it'll go up, they'll double, and they'll think, oh, I got a profit, I got to take it. They'll be, hanging on to it and being patient. It's not simple. And everyone should consider their own situation, and nobody should put more in it than they can afford the volatility. Yeah. I mean, one thing I think some Bitcoiners, a mistake they make is just say, hey, take all your money and put it in this. No, that's not true. Because it does go up and down a lot. It is volatile. And so when I'm talking to a friend and saying, put some money in Bitcoin, I always say, be sure that what you put in there, you can live with a drawdown of 50%, because I've lived with 5 of those, and they're no fun. But I know it's, they go to higher highs after each drawdown. And by the way, I've used the drawdowns to buy more. So,
I should have bought more.
Exactly. I mean, it was at 15,000 as recently as a few years ago, and I was buying more, but I didn't have anything else to sell to buy more with.
Leopold argues that the Fiat system is approaching a breaking point. He points to 2 major turning points: the 2008 financial crisis and the COVID-19 pandemic, both of which triggered unprecedented money printing. In just 2 years, the U.S. expanded its money supply by trillions, creating nearly 40% of all dollars in existence. To Leopold, this isn't just monetary policy, it's a warning sign. He cites Jerome Powell's dismissive remarks on inflation as a clear example of elite indifference to the long-term consequences.
I think in the next 10 years, the monetary system is going to substantially change, and that we're going to have the failure or severe inflation in fiat currencies, and the political backdrop is going to be that people are going to demand that we go back to the sound money standard that created America, which was the greatest nation in the world in 1946. In 1946, we were on the gold standard. We stood at the top of the world. And after that, things began to deteriorate. And, they deteriorated because we drifted away from first principles. First principle is sound money is important. And the book talks about that. I mean, in fact, there's a chapter in there that sound money is a moral issue, and I believe it is. It's written about in the Bible, honest weights and measures. I mean, sound money is written into our Constitution. Only gold and silver can be money. But what happened is that politicians, with their egos and their lust for power, have led us away from that basic principle. And in so doing, we're now in this big damn mess. And so what's got to happen is the honest remnant of this country, the God-fearing, hardworking, honest people that make this country run, have got to rise up, and we're going to do it. I mean, we are going to do it, Robert. I am absolutely convinced. But the only way we're going to do it is if we all read books like this and understand the issue clearly, so that we know who the enemy is and we know how to fight him to make things better. I've met guys who were mining it on Apple II computer, basic Apple computers back in 10 and 11, and they had 10,000 Bitcoin. It got to $2. They were young kids and they needed a car, and they sold it all to buy a $20,000 car. And think about what 10,000 Bitcoin is worth today. You'd be a billionaire. I mean, it's just, there's never been anything like this. And so people need to get their heads around it. And I will say the book, I think, does a nice job of doing that. I mean, the first part is all about the problem of how we're being screwed. But the second part really is quite hopeful, and it's the solution. And that part, too, I've tried to make it very easy. I mean, I used my wife as the reader test, because she's not a financial person. She's a writer. And I said, do you understand this? And she said, yeah, I do, but you should make this simpler. You should, there's a chapter in there called Skepticism, where I tried to point out that, this is a technological development, right? It's a new technology, digital immutable scarcity. And so I tried to point out, and I said, look, I mean, when cars came out, everyone thought they were dangerous. When electricity, there's a great cartoon in there. When electricity came out, everyone thought everyone was going to get electrocuted. But, imagine a world without electricity and cars, and so there's a lot of skepticism around this whole thing. But once you kind of peel back the layers, you realize that it's truly an invention that's important. And I think it represents the future of money. I mean, I've said many times, I think my children and grandchildren will price things in Satoshis, and the dollar will be kind of an ancient thing that, it'll be like the denarius, the Roman coin that was used in Rome. So, we'll just have to see. But I feel pretty strongly about it, and I've studied it for quite some time. Yeah. We've really actually had two big prints, okay? Well, even more if you go back far enough, but most notably in recent history, we had a very big print in 2008. The Fed balance sheet was 800 and some odd billion before, our former Fed chairman, Bernanke, decided that he could print money at will, as he said in his infamous speech. We have a printing press. And so they grew the balance sheet and the money supply by, $3 trillion. And then, of course, that was just, the first round. The second round was COVID, where they grew the balance sheet by another $5 trillion. The balance sheet's a proxy for the money supply. They're not directly linked, but they're close.
Wait, Lawrence, did you say in this book here that 40% of the money was printed during COVID?
Yeah, isn't that amazing?
40% of all the money in the U.S. was printed during a few years ago?
Yeah, the nation's 220 some odd years old, and they grew the money supply by 40%. And then the guy who was in charge of that growth, Powell, said inflation is transitory. And then when it became clear that it wasn't, and they printed, and they had a 9%, annualized inflation rate at a conference, at an elite monetary conference in Jackson Hole, he joked and said, "Oh yeah, the good ship inflationary has sailed." He joked about it as though, "Oh yeah, I'm kind of sorry I screwed up, but no big deal." Right? Yeah. Well, fine, no big deal to him because he's worth $100 million. But how about the rest of us that have to struggle to get by? And it's absolutely criminal what these people have done to us. And my book lays that out chapter and verse. And
Leopold reminds us that there is hope, and it's called Bitcoin. He references a book he co-authored that breaks down the issue of fiat debasement and presents the Bitcoin solution in clear, accessible language to ensure it truly resonated. He even tested it on his wife, who has no formal financial training. The second half of the book explores Bitcoin's transformative potential, framing it not just as a new asset, but as a full-blown monetary revolution. Leopold compares its emergence to other once misunderstood breakthroughs like the automobile, electricity, and the internet technologies that were initially dismissed but ultimately reshaped the world. Watch this next to see why Bitcoin is just getting started.